Okay, I think we are up. Okay, I think we are up. We are live. Let me just double check. I'm still really new to live streaming and I really don't know how it all works. So I'm gonna make sure my live stream is up. Looks like it's up. And I really don't know. Oh, don't want to be playing that. Okay. Let me set up the live chat. We should be right to go now. So I'm just going to go ahead and start, and people who want to, who don't get to watch the start, you can just watch the start later on. So thank you very much everyone for joining in again today. And let me just get the chat up so I can see if anyone, hello Optic Gamer, thanks for joining. So we've got a few news things that I wanted to share with you guys today. And this is a very, very late and impromptu live stream. I wasn't going to be doing a live stream today or this week. I was just going to save it for next week. But it was a public holiday today and we weren't going to go to work. And my wife suddenly decided she wanted to go to work, which meant I was able to come here. And on the way here, I thought, well, I'm just going to do a live stream then. So I've cobbled together some news stories and I thought I would just hang out with you guys. This is mostly just sharing stuff. So feel free to like chat and I will respond to your chats, usually after each news article that I bring up. Hello, Wayne. Hello, Dana. So why not we begin, and people who want to catch up later on can do so. And this is kind of like a podcast, so you can also listen to it that way as well if you just want to leave it on YouTube and just listen to it as a podcast. So today, what we're going to be talking about is there's been quite a lot of acquisitions. So I just want to talk about why we're seeing quite a lot of these at the moment. And there is a news article about the Terraria Dev getting his Google account reopened or rectified. That was pretty interesting. Sony is going to open up their Ps5 SSD storage finally, but it looks like it's going to be happening in the summer and not now. So they're still, I guess, sorting out some kinks. And maybe it's also because there aren't really that many Gen 4 SSDs around at the moment. There's news of Final Fantasy Intergrade. Now, I think that was news from last week. So, but I think people who haven't caught up with this news, it'd be interesting to know. No, this is not a new Final Fantasy VII game. This is the Final Fantasy VII remake from PS4, but now it's going to be on PS5. And finally, to round up the gaming news articles, we're going to be talking about FIFA Ultimate Team. And this is a really long, in-depth article that I do want to share because, man, this is super interesting about how, I guess, companies these days are trying to use every trick in the book to try and squeeze more money out of their customers. Now, this is a lawsuit that actually got thrown out, or actually retracted, I should say. So the class action lawsuit, the public or whoever filed this lawsuit, they decided to retract their lawsuit. But nevertheless, I think it's still interesting why this lawsuit was brought against EA. Now, finally, to round up all of this gaming news, we usually end with hardware stuff. So we're going to be talking about the RX 6700 XT, which was finally announced last night, last night my time, but I haven't actually watched the show from AMD, so I'm just going off video cards articles here, and this was rather late. I think it would have been like about 1 a.m. my time, so I didn't stay up for that, but we pretty much knew everything about the RX 6700 XT anyway, so I think the RX 6700 XT, if you followed my channel and you know everything about the RX 6700 XT, then there really wasn't all that much that we're going to reveal. And the price, they already, many people had leaks about the price anyways. Okay, so let's start. Let's quickly get into it. And we're probably going to keep it to an hour and a half because people who want to watch the show later on, it won't feel like it's dragging too much. Okay, so we have some acquisitions, and funnily enough, there have been lots in the past week. So the first one was Torchlight 3 developer, which was bought by Zynga, and I'm going to just go through all three first before I talk about them. And Motorsport Games moves to acquire rFactor 2. Now that was today. This is 3rd of March 2021. And this was yesterday. Epic acquires Fall Guys developer Mediatonic. Now, what is going on here? Like so many acquisitions at the moment. Well, I think the most obvious one that I can think of is that currently it's the US tax file season. So if you, I guess, think about the way that tax works. If companies have way too much profit and they don't want to pay it in tax, well, usually they will try and spend some of that. And this might be, I guess, to buy companies. Or this might be other things like make new hires. So they will try and increase their expenditure if their profits are too much. And that will bring down the amounts of taxes that they need to pay because it's all about investments for them. So I think that is why we're seeing a lot of these acquisitions at the moment. And most of these acquisitions, ultimately, it's all about the amount of capital that you gain from this. And sometimes, yes, there are things like, for example, for Fall Guys, it might be because they see that this company is doing really well in terms of gaining new or pulling away certain audiences. So Mediatonic, I don't actually know if they've made any other games. It might be, Fall Guys might be their first game. Maybe somebody can correct me, but I think Fall Guys might be their first game. And so perhaps Epic Games is looking at this as a situation where, well, we need to be the ones trying to pull out Steam players or people who are deep into the Steam system. And Fall Guys was able to extract different types of people to come and play their game because their game looked fun and interesting. So that might be one reason why they want to acquire Fall Guys. Another reason might be because, well, for Zynga, it's a capital acquisition. So Torchlight 3, a really impressive developer. I don't know if Torchlight 3 developer actually developed Torchlight 2 and 1. It looks like Etra Games actually only developed Torchlight 3, but generally I would say that that's a pretty impressive game anyways. I haven't played Torchlight 3, but by all accounts it looks like it's improved upon Torchlight 1 and 2. And I've been playing Torchlight 2. I think, yeah, it's Torchlight 2. I've been playing Torchlight 2 recently, like a couple of weeks ago. So if they've improved upon Torchlight 2, then I think they're already doing really well. And so when you go and acquire a developer like this, you want solid developers that are really good small developers that can help grow your overall business. So even if they may not produce another game, but the quality of the staff there will be able to help them in other projects. As for Motorsport Games, well, that's an interesting one because NASCAR, they developed NASCAR Heat, and also it looks like they're developing this game called British Touring Car Championship. I think that's what it is. So they're looking to acquire rFactor 2. Now, rFactor 2 is a huge racing game on the PC with a subscription. So yeah, I think, with all of these companies trying to take these make acquisitions, I will need to turn that off. Yeah, with all of these companies making acquisitions, I think most of this is just about acquiring more capital, especially if it's tied in with the US tax file season. All right, so let's take a look at this article about the Terraria Dev. And so a couple of weeks ago, Relogic, who make Terraria, the founder Andrew Spinks, he got pretty upset at Google because he lost his account for about 3 or 4 weeks. And I want to talk about this because a few other people around about this time also lost their accounts. We know that Hardware Unboxed had a problem with YouTube, and Graphically Challenged a couple of months ago also had a problem, lost his account or lost his monetization for a couple of weeks. And so, the thing with Google is that they're trying to automate everything. So the problem with Google is that when they automate everything, when you get glitches and things that end up with people losing their accounts, like the Terraria Dev, then they have no idea who's lost what, and they don't have any good customer service in place. So that's the problem. Like they had no idea this would had happened. I don't think that they would have intentionally stopped his entire Google account. It doesn't look like he's actually done anything wrong. So I think that's why I found it interesting that he got pretty mad about this, even though I do understand that 2 or 3 weeks is a really long time to lose everything. So he says, I absolutely have done let me try again. I absolutely have not done anything to violate your terms of service, so I can take this no other way than you deciding to burn this bridge. He added, consider it burned. Terraria for Google Stadia is cancelled. My company will no longer support any of your platforms moving forward. And so he immediately took to the fact that Google cancelled his account and didn't want to say anything about it, and so he must have assumed the worst. And just from the fact that there seems like there's a lot of people just losing their account randomly, just feels to me like it's a glitch. And he's right to get mad for losing his account for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but I'm not sure it's that accurate that it was for something that he did, because I don't know, only he would know that if he did something wrong. And just going by public information, if he didn't do anything wrong, then it seems like it's a little bit of an exaggeration to just assume that he did something wrong, and then therefore he will pull Terraria on Google Stadia. Now, this finally got fixed, however, and in a new update posted to the Terraria forum, Relogic has announced the Stadia version will go ahead after all. As you may have noticed, we had a ton of issues to kick off this year, stemming from the locking down of Redigit's entire Google account in early January. The company wrote, after a month of pushing and with the immense support of our fans, Google finally reached out and was able to provide a lot of transparency around the situation and to restore access to all of our accounts. Due to the hard work the Stadia team has put in, as well as our partners at 505 Games, we have decided that we will allow the upcoming launch of Terraria on Google Stadia to proceed, the statement continued. The Terraria Stadia build is based on the DR Studios 1.4.0.5 build and is currently at Google for certification review. Yeah, I don't know, you can really use like pulling your entire game as leverage to get your Google account back. So I guess sometimes people just have a hissy fit and then decide that yeah, they're just gonna have a bit of a rant, and I don't think that's very professional to like pull your entire work off a platform. Well, that kind of makes sense, and honestly, this is mostly down to the fact that Google has glitches and has a really, really bad customer service support. Like, if I was on Amazon and I was going to buy something, I can talk to somebody straight away and they'll help me with my purchase. Or if I have some problem with the Amazon, like shipping or not getting my product, then I'm able to talk to someone immediately. And now, how can Amazon do that with so many customers and Google cannot do it with their own services? That kind of blows my mind. Like, yeah, sure, you would need to spend significant amounts of money to have customer service support for pretty much every email account that is out there. So that's probably why they don't do it. But I think at least there should be some sort of system where you can open a ticket and then get something resolved and not take like 3 or 4 weeks, because like 3 or 4 weeks is just way too long. I think they really need to work to get this to happen within like 24 to 48 hours, resolving issues on pretty much everywhere on their platform. Okay, let's move on to the next story, and this is a story about the PS5. I don't know how many of you guys have PS5s, but I don't have one yet, mostly because I don't have a 4K TV. I know you can play on a 1080p TV, but I'm just going to wait until I get a 4K TV, and then I will get a PS5, especially when a lot of the games that come out actually end up being on PC anyway. So even though I really want one, I know that would just divide up my time, and I think that would be an issue. Like anytime you buy an extra console, it kind of divides up your time. So I have a Switch, so maybe at the end of the Switch I will get a PS5. Okay, so they're going to finally open up the PS5 for internal storage this summer, and this is something they desperately need, and I don't know why it's taking them so long for them to do that. I mean, if you think about it, the SSD is literally just another drive, right? Like, how can you not just open that up? Like, why are they waiting so long? And I think the reason obviously is that there's so many other brands of internal storage or SSDs that are out there, and they don't really want people to be choosing the wrong one. So I think they're trying to wait until there are some reputable SSDs out there that they've tested for a while now. So they've been testing for like the last 4 or 5 months on a retail PS5, and these things get hot. That's why they have heat sinks. So I wonder if there has to be enough room for them to put an SSD with a heatsink on into the PS5. So, well, I think it'll be interesting because the PS5 already gets pretty hot, and we know the memory gets really hot. And this is another thing that you add in there to get it really hot. So I think yeah, that's my only real issue with this PS5, is that I don't think the design is actually that impressive from a heat standpoint. But anyway, Bloomberg says the support for additional drives will come alongside a firmware update that unlocks higher cooling fan speeds to prevent the console from overheating, which would have to you'd have to have that because the PS5 already runs way too hot. Okay, so it says here, next generation games of PS5 can only be run from the console's internal storage, which makes just 667 gigabytes available for game installs. When you consider the install size of some games such as Call of Duty, the PS5 can fill up fast. Exacerbating the problem is the fact that currently there's no way to move PS5 games off the SSD. Thus far, Sony has not whitelisted any third-party M2 NVMe drives for extra solid-state drive space. According to Bloomberg, after the planned firmware upgrade goes live, PS5 users will be able to take a plastic cover off the PS5 and attach a new storage unit. Sony did not confirm the release timing of the upgrade, but did say it was working to enable M2 SSD storage expansion for PlayStation 5. So then it goes on and on. But this is interesting. The PS5 has a double-sided air intake fan, which is 120 millimeters in diameter and 45 millimeters thick. The console uses a temperature sensor inside the APU, as well as 3 temperature sensors on the mainboard to control the fan speed. And it's these fan control parameters Sony can tweak via online updates. I'm wondering if you guys have watched the Gamers Nexus teardown of the PS5, because that was really interesting. When he opened that up and tested the memory on the PS5, the PS5 memory comes on well, it's kind of hard to describe. Half of it is attached to the heatsink, and then the other half of the PS5 memory modules aren't. So it's a really bizarre design, and that's why I said the design was really bad from a heat standpoint. So the ones that are attached to the heatsink are 75 degrees or 70 degrees, and then the ones that are attached, not attached to the heatsink, that are only attached to, like, I think it's attached to some backplate. I can't remember exactly, but they get up to 90 degrees or 95 degrees. And so you have half the memory that is getting really, really hot. So honestly, the PS5 design, it actually feels like they had a really, really big console that had massive heatsink fans, and they had to find some way to shape the design of it to make it all fit a really big, ugly box. And that's what it turned out to be. And once they decided on the shape and size, then they still found that it got way too hot. So that is why we have half the memory under the heatsink and half the memory that's not, which is just mind-boggling if you ask me. But anyway, so yeah, two things that are a huge issue with the PS5 for me anyway at the moment. Now, I still want one, but I think, I think it might make more sense to wait, but it's going to take at least 2 years before we get a PS5 Slim. Normally that would probably come out if they reduce the size of the processor, so then it uses less power. So yeah, that would probably take like a couple of months before we get a PS5 Slim. So I think it's still a long way to go before we get a brand new PS5. So it's not something that I think people, if they want one now and can get one, should probably wait for a Slim. But for people who don't mind waiting, who, like, for example, I don't really see any games on the PS5 right now that I'm desperate to play. I already beat Demon's Souls anyways on PS3. So it's like, yeah, it's not something that I absolutely need to have a PS5 right now. I'm sure it's really cool though, because you get PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 all in the one system. I think it is a good system. But yeah, the couple of problems that I have, obviously the heat that I already talked about, and then number 2 obviously is the amount of storage. And with 825 gigabytes, I don't think you actually get 825 gigabytes. It says here, next generation games of PS5 can only be run from console's internal storage, which makes just 667 gigabytes available for game installs. So 600 gigabytes for games. Obviously you're going to put other things on it like themes and, you know, maybe updates for the console. So that's going to take some of that space as well. So really you're only getting about 600 gigabytes for games. and some games take 100 gigabytes now. So, and I gotta say, 1 terabyte of Gen 4 storage, I think it's about $150. So that's why I also said that the Xbox Series S didn't make any sense, because if you wanted to buy SSD storage for it, well, then you're effectively paying the same price as an Xbox Series X. So just get the Xbox Series X. So Xbox Series S, bad deal. I don't think anyone should be getting it unless, you know, you have an extra TV somewhere in your room and you want something for it. Well, okay, then that kind of makes sense in a weird way. Like, you're kind of buying a bit of a gimped Xbox Series X. So just save up the $200 and get the Xbox Series X. I think for most people who want to buy hardware, I don't think that $200 is going to break the bank. I don't want to like be condescending or anything like that, but I really genuinely think that $200 extra is way better on that you put towards the Xbox Series X. But that's the thing, like if you buy a PS5 and it has 825 gigabytes, then you have to add another $150 on. So technically your PS5 is what, like $650 now? So that's another reason to wait until maybe they have a 2 terabyte PS5 Slim. So that's my thinking anyway. Okay, let's move on to Final Fantasy VII. I just wanted to bring this news article up. I don't really know that much about Final Fantasy VII. I did play Final Fantasy in the past, but I think I've kind of grown out of Final Fantasy a little bit, and I don't think I'm the target audience anymore. Even though, yes, my name is JimRPG, and I'm supposed to play RPGs and JRPGs. Yeah, I think Final Fantasy is one of those things where, I don't know, I kind of moved on from Final Fantasy. But I did download Final Fantasy 12, so I'm excited to play that on Gamepass. And I think, I kind of like that old style Final Fantasy a little bit more. Okay, so in this article it says here, PlayStation 5 owners will be able to enjoy an enhanced version of Final Fantasy VII Remake starting 10th of June, courtesy of Square Enix's newly announced Intergrade release, which also brings a new Yafi Kizaragi episode. Oh my goodness, it says Intergrade. Intergrade will freshen up Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS5 with improved textures, lighting, and fog effects. And there's also a new graphics optimization mode offering 4K resolution and a 60 FPS performance optimization mode. Additionally, Intergrade players can take advantage of a new normal classic difficulty option, improved loading times, and a new photo mode. Owners of Final Fantasy VII Remake on PlayStation 4 will be able to download Intergrade on their PS5s for free. It's also available as a standalone PS5 release for newcomers, bringing over their save data if need be. Although Square reminds players a PlayStation 5 with a disk drive is required to upgrade from a physical PS4 copy. Yeah, and again, that's why I wouldn't have bought the digital release, because all of those PS4 games that you used to have, you can use them on your PS5. And I know a lot of people would just be buying digital games. But nevertheless, I think that this drive is good to have, despite it costing $100 more. Yes, I think in terms of an investment, yeah, I think it's worth it. It basically makes your PS5 a PS4. So Optic Gamer 37, I asked him, how much does it, how's the PS5 going for you? It runs great, just the lack of games and storage. Yeah, so same for me. That's what I would feel like right now anyways. I don't have a PS5, but I feel like the storage is a little bit of a problem. I just bought 1 terabyte of storage for the PC, and I've got 2 terabytes there. So now I'm on 3 terabytes on PC. And so with every game being like 100 gigabytes, it's so difficult to just run on a single 1 terabyte SSD. I like to stay home says, what was the last good Final Fantasy? I didn't play Final Fantasy 15, so I feel like that was the moment where Final Fantasy kind of left me. I guess you could say while I was playing Final Fantasy 13, it kind of left me then. Because, oh my goodness, Final Fantasy 13, I was pretty hyped for that game, it looked great. But yeah, I finished Final Fantasy 13, and the first 20 hours was basically just, yeah, a linear JRPG. Like, what the hell was that? Oh my goodness. That wasn't the only problem. The problem was it took 20 hours to actually get all your abilities. So it was a 20-hour tutorial until you got to like level 13 or world 13 or whatever it was called, where you had, I don't want to spoil too much, but obviously it's 10 years ago. Yeah, where you had all of those dinosaurs and everything, and everybody said, oh my goodness, it's amazing. But yeah, I think that area was really where you'd only want to play it if you were going to min-max like all your characters. So it's fine if you wanted to, you know, after you finish the story, you come back and try to like level up all your characters. It's kind of fun like that. But in terms of overall design of that area, it wasn't even that big, to be honest. It was just bigger than all the other levels. I like to stay home says, I stalled out on 13, was definitely the first bad Final Fantasy experience for me. Yeah, I really liked 10. I played about 10 hours of Final Fantasy 12 when it came out, and I liked that a lot. I just ran out of time, and I finished 13. So I played those 3. And honestly, 13 is fine. It's not as good as 10. And even looking back at 10 now, it's quite a linear game, and the story isn't something that I'm that excited to go back and play, even though I loved it at the time. Final Fantasy 10 at the time was amazing because this was like 2001, I think, and it had the best graphics at the time on the PS2. It had amazing JRPG gameplay, especially for people who are new to JRPGs, whose it was basically the first JRPG that they played at the time. And so at the time, yeah, that was one of the best games on the system. But anyway, we're supposed to be talking about Final Fantasy VII, and I don't even know if I'm going to have time to play this. I don't know if they're going to, how long it's going to take them to make the Final Fantasy VII. So it could be 2 episodes, it could be 3 episodes. I don't know how long they're going to drag this out. They're probably going to drag it out for quite a bit. But it looks like they're bringing it to PS5, and they'll probably finish the series on PS5, I think. Now, if you recall Final Fantasy 13, that had 3 episodes, and so it took them a really long time to make the first one, but not a long time to make the other 2. So I think the future series of Final Fantasy VII episodes, so that I don't think they're going to take as long to make as the first one. So I don't know how many sports fans we got here. I'm a huge sports fan, so this is the other thing that I do besides playing games. I watch a lot of English Premier League, and Everton are doing amazing this season. Well, better than last season. They finally beat Liverpool at home. But anyway, let's stick to games and football. We've got a couple of football stories. That's why I wanted to just segue into that. But Football Manager is coming to Xbox Gamepass in March. And so it says here, This month's Xbox Game Pass editions are headlined by Football Manager 2021 on PC and console, which will join Microsoft's subscription library tomorrow on 4th of March. Now, a couple of months ago, they also, they had Football Manager 2020 and they ended that. So it seems like they might keep this running for like 6 months or so before the next Football Manager comes out. And so I think this is a pretty good system. With the season ending, they may as well put it on Game Pass so that they get people to play Football Manager and then get more sales for next year's game. But I used to play Football Manager religiously back in like the 90s and early 2000s. This was my jam. Seriously, I played so much Football Manager. Well, back then it was called Championship Manager before it moved on to Football Manager. And Everton weren't doing too well at that time. So this was really the only way to fulfill the hopes and dreams of the club. Now, NBA 2K21 will also be on Game Pass, and it will be on console and on Android via xCloud. Madden NFL 21 is available now via EA Play, which is also included if you are an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscriber. So that's not on the PC, that will only be on the console. EA Play also gets Star Wars Squadrons at some point this month. That's Motive Studio spaceship dogfighting game, which launched in October last year. And looking to April, there's one final dollop of sports on the horizon, the addition of NHL 21 on console for EA Play at some point next month. Now it also says what they've taken out of the Xbox Game Pass catalog, and that is Alvastia Chronicles, Astrologaster, I'm sorry I'm butchering all these names, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, Kona, and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. So I really like Game Pass. I think the thing is, I don't even know if they have that loophole still available, because last year I bought Xbox Live Gold. I bought 3 years of Xbox Live Gold, and then I converted that for $1 into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. And so for $40 a year, I basically got Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So I paid $120 for Xbox Pass Ultimate for 3 years, basically. So for me, of course, I feel like that's a deal, because if you pay $15 a month for Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, what's that? 15 times 12? I think that's about $180. Yeah, I think $180 is a little bit expensive unless you're using it all the time. So if you can find a deal on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, I think it makes sense to get that instead of buying a lot of other games, right? Like, it's helped me not have to really buy any games. The only game I bought recently was Cyberpunk 2077, because obviously that's not coming to Game Pass. But I think for people who are considering Game Pass, I think it's a good deal. It's so many games on that. You'll never run out of games to play. So this is the article that I wanted to talk about today that really caught my eye. I don't know how many sports fans there are here, but I think this is really interesting, and I don't think it only relates to sport. I think it relates to how games are made in general, but it's quite an in-depth article, and this is about FIFA scripting, and there was a FIFA scripting lawsuit which was withdrawn after EA provides detailed technical information and access to speak with our engineers. Now, even though it's withdrawn, I still think it's really interesting that, one, there was a patent made about how EA could, in fact, push, I guess, or script things so that they could squeeze more money out of their gamers. And we'll get into more of this as we go through the article. But and I'll just read some excerpts out to you because I just find it fascinating that most of the time we think we're playing a game, and sometimes you feel like, hang on a minute, the AI shouldn't be actually doing that because it wasn't doing that before. Like, it's not consistent. And so this is something that might be called dynamic difficulty, or what EA likes to term dynamic difficulty adjustment. So it says here, dynamic difficulty adjustment, known more commonly by FIFA players as scripting or momentum, is a technology that unfairly affects the results of matches in a bid to encourage more spending on packs. While EA has admitted to owning the pattern, it has always denied using the tech in Ultimate Team. So here's EA's statement, in which the company vowed never to use dynamic difficulty adjustment in Ultimate Team. Ensuring play is fair is critical to all of us at EA, and we've tried to be clear as possible that this commitment applies to us just as much as it does to our players. We've publicly said before that we do not use any scripting or dynamic difficulty adjustment or anything similar that would automatically adjust the difficulty of gameplay in FIFA, Madden, and NHL Ultimate Team matches. Our clear statements were recently challenged in a lawsuit that alleged we did, in fact, use DDA in Ultimate Team modes. We're pleased to share that the plaintiffs have now dismissed their case. We provided them with detailed technical information and access to speak with our engineers, all of which confirmed again that there is no DDA or scripting in Ultimate Team modes. This is the right result. OpticGamer37 says, yep, that sounds like EA. Yeah, so they said that they're not using it, but again, how many games have you played that you felt like this doesn't feel right? I'm not even just talking about EA right now. I'm talking about across a lot of games. Even something as simple as rubber banding in racing games. For example, Nintendo with Mario Kart. How many times have you felt like this scripting is unfair to make the race close? That's as fair as I can put it, right? Like, if you're racing Mario Kart and then you're at the front, well, then the other racers end up racing faster. Like, is that fair? Or is that right? Is that how racing should be? It doesn't feel like how racing should be. Okay, anyway, let's keep going with this. While EA does own a patent for DDA technology, that technology never was in FIFA, Madden, or NHL, and never will be. We would not use DDA technology to give players an advantage or disadvantage in online multiplayer modes in any of our games, and we absolutely do not have it in FIFA, Madden, or NHL. So what they're saying is that they're not using it for Ultimate Team packs. And now, if you're not familiar with FIFA Ultimate Team, essentially what that is like virtual trading cards. And those trading cards give you access to a player that you can use for your team. So everybody wants to pick up like the gold Ronaldo or the gold Messi, for example, because they give you the best stats, and then you can just run around everyone and score goals. But those cards are actually hard to get, so they're very rare. And so the chances of people getting one is very slim. So they have to keep opening more packs, and those packs cost a lot of money. So now what people are accusing EA of doing is of losing games, of losing online games, so that they have to go and buy more packs, which is pretty freaking nefarious if you ask me. How you can code a game so that maybe you get fouled, or maybe you the goalkeeper saves your goal at the last minute. So there's so many ways for them to like deny you. And it's funny, like, I don't know if you guys play that many sports games, because this is a JimRPG channel where we talk about RPGs. So the number of times I've seen, not just in FIFA, but in Pro Evolution Soccer, where the ball just somehow goes through some guy's legs, or goes through like in between an area where their hand or their armpit or whatever it is, like you're thinking like, wait a minute, that it should have been stopped. Like, how does the keeper not stop this? He had plenty of time to see it, and it just goes right through him. Like, it's incredible. Or, you know, the goal, like you kick a ball that's like right down the middle, and then somehow the goalkeeper will just flail at it and completely miss. So yeah, I've seen it like 100 times, millions of times. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the dynamic difficulty adjustment. So the goal of EA's dynamic difficulty adjustment patent is maximizing a player's engagement throughout the entire game. Here's an example of how it could work. Some other non-limiting examples of features of the video game that can be modified, which may or may not be detectable by the user. My God, like the language may or may not be detectable by the user. I think a lot of people are detecting this, and it's really people who don't play very much that can't detect it. Can include providing extra speed to an in-game character, improving throwing accuracy of an in-game character, improving the distance or height that the in-game character can jump, adjusting the responsiveness of controls and the like. In some cases, the adjustments may additionally or alternatively include reducing the ability of an in-game character rather than improving the ability of the in-game character. Wait, let me just read that. Okay. So instead of improving the ability, it reduces the ability of the in-game character. So Ronaldo suddenly plays like crap, like for example, like that. For example, the in-game character may be made faster but have less shooting accuracy. Yeah. And the thing is, EA, at least in this article, has denied that they use it for Ultimate Team Packs, but I don't think they're actually denying that they actually use parts of this philosophy. Like, that's a difference, right? You don't, this is a philosophy. It's not hard code into the game. So they could be using this type of philosophy where they gimp certain characters, or depending on how the game is played at the moment. For example, if you're leading 6-0, well, they might just bump up the AI of the opponent. Or it could be the computer opponent, could be making the opposition players faster, like real life opposition, right? So FIFA players, they believe that buried somewhere deep within FIFA's code is secret scripting that helps players out if they're losing or makes the game harder when they're winning. It's a belief fueled by frustrating goalkeeper parries that lead to tap-ins, top quality strikers missing open goals, and dramatic last-minute equalizers suffered after you've dominated a game. The FIFA community calls this alleged scripting momentum. So this article goes on for a long time, but I think there are a few quick quotes here that I really want to read out. So this is FIFA creative director Matt Pryor, okay? So there's some error in some of the algorithms for trapping the ball. That's inbuilt throughout the game, but that's all measured on an individual level. It doesn't take into account, oh, this is 1-0 in the 90th minute, let's give this guy more error. It's very much individual, and as a result, it can happen at any time. That's part of the beauty of the sport. So Matt Pryor is denying this. This was back in 2017, by the way. I'm a Man City fan. Last City game I watched us have 80% possession. Borro just nicked it, went down the other end, the first shot at the goal. To me, that's frustrating. If I was to have that in FIFA, there might be the expectation that that's scripted, but the reality of it is there are errors in football, and that just makes football what it is. If everything was predictable and uniform and all the rest of it, you take some of the heart and soul out of football. We represent the real world sport, and you get that in both our game and the real world sport. Okay, you know what? I think that philosophy right there shows you what's wrong about FIFA. And, well, I play a lot of Pro Evolution Soccer, but I don't think Pro Evolution Soccer does this to such a degree. Obviously, there are other things, there are other problems with Pro Evolution Soccer that I get frustrated about, but normally it's very consistent. So if you do the same thing every time, you get the same result. That has to be the core of what a game needs to be. You can't have Demon Souls or Dark Souls where sometimes you make errors because that's the human level of Dark Souls, right? Everything needs to be consistent. And so in Pro Evolution Soccer, some of the things that annoy me are like when you have the ball, you run slower than the opponent because they want the defense to come back and make it difficult for you. It's like a fact. Like it's really tough to stay ahead of your defender who doesn't have the ball. But on the other side is it's the same for everyone. So it happens all the time. So you can track back very quickly in Pro Evolution Soccer. Now, with FIFA, like now they're saying that sometimes you can have mistakes and it has nothing to do with the way you press the button or what buttons you pressed. It's just human error, basically. And I'm not sure I agree with that philosophy. And that is probably why so many people are upset at FIFA, because sometimes it's just not consistent. Okay, so that about does it for the FIFA Ultimate Team, and I'm actually surprised. Sure, they've had this lawsuit withdrawn, but there are actually many problems with games in general that allow rubber banding and boost. And one of the most significant ones that I've had in the past was Burnout 3. I don't know if you guys played Burnout 3, but essentially, I don't even feel like I'm racing in that game. You can stop the car basically, and the racers will slow down. They will drive slower to wait for you to catch up. And then you can't get any further than like 4 or 5 seconds ahead of your opponents. So I literally just gave up on that game after a while. But yeah, I think things like that make games annoying to play. Okay, so let's get into some hardware news and video cards. Now I made a video about this, about Intel Rocket Lake this week. And I actually said at the start of my video that it was going to launch on March the 16th. Well, actually, that looks like that was just the rumored date. And I think I said rumored in that video. But Intel officially announced that they're going to launch Rocket Lake S on March the 30th because they were responding to the fact that people had already started to sell these CPUs. So, for example, there was a retailer in Germany, and I think they were called Mind Factory, and they started selling their CPUs. And so I think they wanted to just set the date for everybody, tell everybody that it's going to be March 30th. Now, what I find really interesting is that some people have got their CPUs way ahead of time. I think in Malaysia, we had Rocket Lake, or some Rocket Lake CPUs, a couple of weeks ago already. So these retailers would be sitting on this stock and they'd be waiting 6 weeks to sell it. Excuse me. So, getting a bit dry here. Okay, so really all I just wanted to say was, well, I wanted to correct my video from a few days ago about Rocket Lake launching on the 16th. So it looks like it's going to be the 30th. Now it looks like they might make an official announcement on March the 16th. So I think here, where is it? Videocast says, we still do not know if the rumored announcement date is still in place March the 16th. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about Intel Rocket Lake. And if you want to know more about Intel Rocket Lake, make sure to go and watch my video about that. And you can find that on my channel. And I go through all of the specs for the i7 and the i9. Now, interestingly, the pricing, I just want to quickly touch on it. I thought about making another video, but maybe we'll just cover it quickly here. So let me see if I can get into my Twitter. It's a bit annoying. Okay, let me try and... Okay, see if I can get into it here. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay. So I mentioned, or at least I talked about, whether it's worth it to get a K SKU or the F SKU. Now, the interesting thing about the Rocket Lake series is that it's only 8 core 16 threads at the moment, and these are all going to be Rocket Lake chips. There are some Comet Lake refreshers, but that's the smaller, or I guess weaker models. So that would be the 1100 and the Celerons and the Pentiums. So they're all Comet Lake refreshers, but these are Rocket Lake refreshers. So this 11400F that you see right down the bottom there, so that would be a Rocket Lake chip, and that is 6 cores, 12 threads. And so this here, right here, is 6 cores, 12 threads. This right here, the top of the line, i9, is a 8 core, 16 thread. So this is secretly the best CPU that you should be getting, or people should be thinking about getting. And make sure you go and check some benchmarks of, say, like a 10400F versus a 10400K. I actually don't know if they have 10400K, but you could check a 10400F versus a 10600K, because they're both 6 core 12 threads. I think there's a difference of about 0.5 gigahertz in speed, but honestly, like, I don't think that's actually going to have much of an impact in terms of performance for games. You will get some frame rate drops, but generally speaking, this would be more than good enough at $120 lower for most games. And I recommend that if you're on the budget system, so if you're under like $700 or $800, don't think about getting the 11600K, because you're going to get very, very close to the same performance on the 1100F, theoretically speaking. Maybe there are some odd cases. There are some games that use the K model better because you can overclock that, and you can get this 11600K almost to like an 11900K. But generally speaking, like if you have that 11400F and your clocks are like 4 gigahertz or whatever, I think that should be more than good enough for gaming for the next 2 or 3 years. Especially if you're just looking 6 core 12 threads. Obviously 8 core 16 threads is going to last you quite a lot longer, but I think yeah, this looks like the deal for me. At $180, if that's the price that it's going to go for, I think that makes more sense to buy that. And don't forget the 5600X right now is still going for like $300. So yes, the 5600X is competing with the 11600K, so they're both $300. But I think people should keep this in mind because there's also 6 core 12 threads. And look, I made a comment here. I said 11700F would be the one I'd get based on value and performance. Okay, finally, our last story here before we just open up the floor to like people's questions. If no one's got any questions or no one's watching, then we're just going to end the stream. And I want to thank everybody who's been watching this show. This was a very impromptu show, so I didn't prepare anything. And sometimes it's a bit tricky to like go for like an hour and a half without actually preparing anything. So I just want to thank everybody that's put up with, I guess, me just rambling on. Okay, so AMD Radeon RX 6700 XT was announced last night, at least last night my time, morning your time. So this was, and this is going to be launching on March the 17th, and it's going to be $479. It says XXX USD, but I'm surprised. I guess maybe what they're saying is that, hello Optic Gamer 37, thank you for staying. Maybe what they're saying is that they don't really know what the street price is, and they didn't want to just put $479 there because nobody is able to get this for $479. So, or nobody will be able to get it for $479. So yeah, I think that makes sense to put a price where they don't actually, say what the price is going to be. Okay, so we know all of the specs for this card already. Essentially, this is the most important thing, is that it's Navi 2022. Oh my goodness, Navi 22 GPU with 40 compute units. And 40 compute units, if you recall, the PlayStation 5 was 36 compute units. And it's clocked pretty close. So I think the PS5 was clocked 2200 megahertz, and this is 2300, so maybe 5% difference. It's got a boost clock of 2581 megahertz. So this will definitely be like about 10-15% faster than the PS5. I think this is a really good card to get if you're looking at that level of performance. And so with PS5s, it's going to have very close performance. But, you know, with the PS5, the developers are going to be able to develop specifically for that PS5 hardware. So while at first it might seem like they might get better performance, in actual fact, like the underlying hardware is more or less about the same, and the 6700 XT should be 10-15% better. But you might not see that in games, on PC games, because developers won't be developing specifically for that 6700 XT. So on the PS5, what will happen is they might see some scenes where they're incredibly intense and heavy. So they might say, well, maybe in this scene, we'll just pull a few things out from the scene. They'll take away some geometry or textures, maybe lower some textures, try and get that scene to perform a little bit better, so they get better performance. So that's what a developer is able to do on their PS5. So I think what you'll end up seeing is that maybe the 6700 XT won't have, it will be about the same or maybe a bit less performance in the PS5, because the PS5 will specifically be able to develop for that PS5 hardware. So I think we should stop here, not stop the stream, but check out these benchmarks from AMD. Now, obviously these are first-party benchmarks, so they're going to be showing you what they want you to see. But I think they are still interesting comparisons, and obviously going to pick games that they want to pick to make their card look better. So as you can see, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I'm pretty sure that's an AMD game, because at the time, Assassin's Creed Valhalla from Ubisoft went to AMD, and Watch Dogs Legion went to Nvidia. And Watch Dogs Legion is the game that had all the DLSS and ray tracing. So you can see that on the AMD card, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is way ahead. Borderlands 3 is better than the 3070, which is surprising, because the 3070 is supposed to be better than the 6700 XT. So I think it's interesting that the first three games that they show you are better than the 3070, especially when the 6700 XT is more in line with the 3060 Ti than the 3070. So this card should be like 10% less than the 3070. So, and you don't really see that in these charts here, because even Cyberpunk 2077 is performing close to a 3070. Now I wonder whether that is because there's not as much VRAM on the 3070. So on the 3070 it's got 8 gigabytes, and the 6700 XT is 12 gigabytes. And I'm pretty sure on my 3090, when I play at 1440p, I'm getting about 8.5 to 9 gigabytes of VRAM. So it has to swap that out a little bit more on the 3070, which might be slowing it down. Dirt 5 is an AMD game. Gears 5 looks like 3070 does better. Hitman 3 is doing way better on the RX 6700 XT. So yeah, they're kind of cherry picking their games here. All of these games are basically doing better on the 6700 XT. And so you really should wait for something like Hardware Unboxed 30 game benchmark review and see what that comes out as. Or even Tech Power Up. Tech Power Up does a lot of games as well for their reviews. And obviously with Watch Dogs Legion, that has DLSS and ray tracing, so that's an NVIDIA game, and it doesn't perform as well. So I think they wanted to include that just to make it look like they're not just including all AMD games. If they didn't have this Watch Dogs Legion, then everybody would complain that they're only showing NVIDIA games. But really, they're showing 80% AMD games here. Now, I take exception to this chart here. It says today's games use more memory, 1440p gaming at max settings, because it says here Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War uses 11 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, pretty much everybody, and I've covered this before, Call of Duty uses or calls for the maximum amount of memory on your card. So if you have 8 gigabytes on your card, it calls for 7.5 gigabytes. And on a 12 gigabyte card, it'll call for 11.5. So for them to put that there is not actually the VRAM usage. And I think NVIDIA fans will be pretty upset about this. And I would say as a neutral person, yeah, this isn't actually the VRAM usage, it's the amount of VRAM that's allocated. And so I think people will get mad. I think they would be pretty upset if they see this because it doesn't actually use 11 gigabytes of VRAM. But maybe they will argue that, well, it doesn't matter what gets used. If it's allocated, then it's using it basically, or it needs that amount of room for whatever it needs to do. So I'll just let the NVIDIA fans and the AMD fans fight over that one, but I can see people complaining about this specific issue. So there's another slide here about the RX 6700 XT compared to the RTX 2080 Super and the 1070 Ti 8 gigabytes. But you've seen all of these benchmarks before, so I'm not going to go over it. I probably should have done the enlarged view to start, but that's okay. So there are the specs there, and I don't think we need to really go over this again, aside from the fact that none of these cards are at these prices now. I think that's the most important thing. And I think the most important thing is there's just no stock of anything right now. So we'll have to wait and see until March the 17th, which is a couple of weeks away, whether we'll get more stock of these cards all at the same time, because there'll probably be one shipment. But the 6900 XT I think is going for about $1,500 where I am. The 6800 XT is about $1,500. So this must be like $1,800 or so, if there are actually cards, which there aren't. There's just no cards of the 6800 XT. The last time I saw it was $1,500. The RX 6800 is about $1,500 as well. So whatever cards out there, they just put $1,500. So my guesstimate for the RX 6700 XT is that it's going to be about $1,200 to $1,500 when it comes out. If you can find this for like even half the price,